Today I'm speaking with Kamron Bennett. Kamron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
It's good to finally chat with you. We've had a tough time getting our schedules aligned, so I appreciate you working with me on that. But I wanted to give everybody a brief bio for Kamron, and then we're going to hear from him. Kamron is an online fitness coach, and I'll have the link for his work beneath our video. But it's KB Fit Online, right?
KB Fit 2.0. If you Google KB Fit 2.0, one word, no spaces, you'll find all my stuff. So,
Awesome, awesome. And I've seen some of your mottos. One of them is "Build yourself from the ground up." Is that correct?
yeah,
That's awesome.
pretty much. Yeah.
Have you found a lot of people just, I imagine in this day and age, really, really appreciative of all the work you're doing to try to help them get fit and in shape and all that?
Oh yeah, most definitely. A lot of people that I like to work with aren't the average, fitness, junkies. They're mostly people who have some sort of conditions, whether it's like, diabetes or obesity, or maybe one of my biggest passions is working with people with scoliosis. So stuff like
Mm,
that. People that have things that they're working on trying to get back, healthy.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I was gonna say I need to watch some of your videos. I'm not in the best shape of my life, so I probably should take some swings too. And Cameron is from Linwood, California. Are you still in California now?
No, I'm in California. I'm actually in Bellflower, California.
Okay. I've never been there, so I wouldn't know which part of that is. But
Yeah.
are you in a part that's more like closer to the city, or a part that's more like foresty, or what's it like?
Mm, it's kind of, I guess it's closer to the city. I don't want to call it suburban. I don't really know how to describe it. It's not like deep in the city, but it's close enough. So yeah, I'm
Gotcha.
probably like 25 minutes away from like LA,
Okay, gotcha.
or
All I
25
know
miles,
is
not minutes.
I've heard the horror stories of the traffic, at least pre-COVID.
Oh yeah. It's terrible.
Well, in terms of your bio, that was all I know. But is there anything else kind of fun or quirky you could add about yourself?
Other than me being addicted to health and fitness, obviously I like to play basketball. I like to skateboard. Um, well, when I say skateboard, take that with a grain of salt because I don't know any tricks. I literally just like to roll. Like
Yeah,
that's me. I go in the parking lot and like to roll around, and that's pretty much it because it's fun. And I also like I'm a big mobile gamer. I like to play games. I actually like to play regular video games, but I don't have. It's more convenient since my phone is with me everywhere I go. I tend to enjoy playing a lot of mobile games like Call of Duty or other stuff like that.
nice, very cool,
So
very cool.
yeah.
Well, the reason we're here today is just to hear Cameron's story. I know that Cameron grew up in a very devout Seventh Day Adventist church and family, but there's a whole background there that we're looking forward to hearing about, how that all worked and the dynamic. So I'd love to, hear your story. So take us in.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll try to start from the beginning as possible. I grew up in a very, like you said, a very devout Seventh Day Adventist household. From birth. My entire family, they are still, I'm pretty much one of the only ones that are not devout anymore, but my entire family is super devout. Seventh Day Adventist. I grew up, I was baptized at the age of 10 years old, but I went to the same elementary school from kindergarten all the way through high school, uh, Seventh Day Adventist school. So I was pretty much ingrained in Seventh Day Adventism. Obviously, I went to church every Saturday because Seventh Day Adventists we don't we go to church on or they go to church on Saturday, not Sunday, as
I was
most
going to ask what
Christians
some
do.
of the uniquenesses are. I know obviously Seventh Day because it's in the name. You take the Sabbath very
Yeah,
seriously, but
yeah,
what are
yeah.
some of the other uniquenesses that you uncovered as you realized that some Christians are very different from that growing up?
Yeah, precisely what you said. Aside from the going to church on a different day, it's more than just going to church on Saturday. It's kind of like the way the Jews keep the Sabbath in terms of like it's not the Saturday, it's from Friday night sunset to Saturday sunset. So that's pretty much what the Sabbath is. It's not. So it's like we always have to know what time the sun sets, so we know when to start. Preparing for the Sabbath, getting our chores done. That's one of the things. One of the other major differences is hell. Um, I think it's becoming more prevalent now, but from when I grew up, I assumed everyone who's a Christian, except for us, Seventh Day Adventists, believed in eternal conscious torment, which means, if you die, you're going to go to hell, you're going to burn up forever and ever. Seventh Day Adventists, they don't believe that. They believe
Hmm.
in, I guess, I don't want to call it temporary hell, but it's pretty much you're just going to be annihilated. When Jesus returns again, he's going to destroy the earth. So if you're not part of his crew, obviously, you'll get burned and then you'll die. So the punishment is eternal, but not the hell is eternal. So it's pretty much you're just gone, dead.
Can I can I ask
Another,
you a few
go
questions
ahead.
about that?
Oh yeah.
The first one about, let me go back one step to the seventh day part of it. Is it
Mhm.
correct to say that Seventh Day Adventists take it very seriously, not just in the sense of Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, but also the idea of you really don't do any work? Like there's a lot of stuff you just can't do. You have to truly rest. Is that correct?
Yes and no. It's kind of like I want to be on the strictest sense. Like if you were one of the strictest Seventh Day Adventists, then yes, which means not just not working. It's like literally nothing that's secular. So you cannot watch TV. Don't even try to play basketball. Don't go to the beach. Don't go swimming. Don't play golf. Don't do
Mm,
anything. It's literally like you can only do Sabbath quote unquote activities, which means anything that has to do with God. You can only listen to Christian music. You can only watch Christian TV shows, which is pretty much like Veggie Tales for the kids, and for the adults, what Joel Osteen or whatever, whoever else you could watch. But you can't, like, everything has to be revolving around Jesus and God and stuff like that. You can't do anything secular. So it's more than just
really
not working. It's literally just like you know a, your time with God at that point. That's it.
it's
So
really a
everything gets shut
holy,
down.
really a
A
holy day
holy
for him.
day. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask too about the annihilation question. For a
Hmm.
lot of Christians, as they look back at what they were taught as they're deconverting and so forth, they look at the question of hell and, of course, the opposite, the enticement of heaven, and it looks like this whole carrot and stick dynamic where it's like, the worst punishment is on this one side. Like, you do really want to go through the worst punishment, not just that it's bad, but also that it lasts forever. And then the other side, of course, don't you want to go to heaven where everything's perfect? And I would imagine that when you take out the part of the equation that says that the punishment is forever, that says, well, worst case scenario, you can be, a horrible, horrible person in any which way you want to. At the end of the day, you're just going to be like a candle that gets snuffed out. You're gone. That's that's worse than not being able to go to a perfect place like heaven, because you're not getting this wonderful gift, but it's not so bad compared to the idea of burning in hell. Did you, when you looked and saw the Christians preaching hellfire, did it stand out to you? Did it shock you that, what if they're right and I truly don't believe, or what if I become an apostate somehow? And then also, how did it work with preaching to people, like to say, don't you want to come to Christ, not just because he is so lovely and loving and wonderful, and he, to fulfill your purpose for even being here, but also, don't you want to escape this horrible outcome? How did you, I mean, I guess you couldn't use that in evangelism. Like, how did you evangelize with that background?
So to answer the first question, when it came to the hell, I never ever was afraid of hell because honestly, the way that I was brought up was that Seventh Day Adventists, we have not necessarily that everyone who's Seventh Day Adventist is going to be saved, but that our doctrine or our theology or the way we thought about the Bible was correct. So the
Mm,
fear of hell was 0% in me. It never feared. I never feared it, not even a little bit. Like zero, like -%. Because I thought because what the thing that goes kind of like the carrot and stick thing that you're talking about is what comes to heaven and hell is because Christians or Seventh Adventists think of heaven differently as well than other Christians, right? Because most Christians think when you die, you're either going to go to heaven or hell. Seventh Day Adventists, they don't see it like that. For Seventh Day Adventists, everybody who dies is dead, and only until Jesus returns again, then everyone's going to get separated, either going to heaven or getting annihilated. So when it came to the fear of hell, I didn't have it because it just, as far as I was concerned, every other Christian had a misunderstanding of what the Bible taught about hell and even heaven. Because, like I said, for all the people that we love, they're not in heaven watching over us, as most Christians would say. Like my family members that I love that have died, they're still dead, and they won't become back alive until Jesus came back. So that's your first question. So actually, 0% of that. When it came to evangelism, when I was older and started to do that, the funny thing is, I never even considered using any, I guess, sticks. It was all carrots. It's kind of like, I guess the only, uh, I guess the only stick would just be our sin. Like it's kind of like, you. I guess I assumed, which was wrong, but in our mindset, I just assumed that everyone knew that Jesus was real, that the Bible was true, and that everyone was sort of like, even if they weren't like an active Christian, everyone kind of had that Christian mindset. So I never felt like I had to hash that part out. It was more so just making sure, okay, I know you believe in Jesus and God in the Bible, but now let's fix everything and get you on the right theology so we can make sure that you're actually, following, or not following, but kind of like making sure you're believing the correct doctrine and theology type of thing. So I never really even thought to use that at all. As a matter of fact, I wanted people to understand that that wasn't true. That fact that people who had died weren't in hell or in heaven, that they were resting and then were gonna be, resurrected when Jesus came back again. So that was never, that thought never crossed my mind at all, honestly.
It kind of reminds me of the whole Old Testament Sheol perspective, where
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
just you're in resting spot. You're not really
yeah,
in anywhere yet. You're just kind of
exactly.
on hold. But kind of
Pretty
like
much, yeah.
when you call a bank or call your cable company, you're just on hold. Um, in terms of the other uniquenesses, and I want to get back to your story in a second, but the Seventh Day Adventist uniquenesses, is it correct that a lot of them follow someone named Ellen G. White?
Yes.
Can you tell us
Man,
what
that's a
who she is or what she has to do with it?
yeah. Yeah, that's a whole thing. So with Ellen G. White, she's the prophetess of the denomination, I guess. And for each individual Seventh Adventist household, it's so different because, like I said, on the strictest sense, like if you were on the strictest Seventh Adventist, maybe if you even look it up online or whatever, she's the prophet of the denomination, and she wrote a bunch of books. Apparently, I don't need to give her whole life story, but all I know is that she started having visions. I know that she did get hit in the head with the rock, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it, or I don't know how much the story is true. Because when I was Seventh Adventist, I actually didn't really uh, care too much about her, anyways. But put that aside for now. She had these visions, and I know she saw heaven and all this other stuff. So a lot of the Seventh Adventist doctrines actually do come from her, which I didn't know either because I never really cared to follow her too much. In my family, even though I think actually I don't even know where they stand on her. I know that some of them believe that she's a prophet, but my family even still they don't really. It was all about the Bible when I was growing up. It wasn't like, oh, we got to follow NG White and Ellen G White. Da, da, da. It was more so that I knew about her, I learned about her, I knew she had books, but
You were free
it
to
wasn't
follow or not follow her wisdom.
because the way it wasn't necessarily following her. I guess the way that I was raised was kind of like she was like it was like the Bible was the word of God and that's it, right? But she was sort of like to help us interpret what the Bible meant type of thing. So it wasn't like it wasn't like extra stuff. It was kind of like she's like a supplement, like to help us understand, interpret the Bible correctly type of thing.
Hmm.
So like I said, some Seventh Adventists are very like strict on her in terms of like you can't consider yourself a Seventh Adventist unless you believe all of her doctrines, you know. And some Seventh Adventists take her very, very seriously. My family, like I said, I never grew up with them taking her so seriously that it was like, life or death if I just know that, I'm pretty sure my parents read her books and stuff like that, but I never really read any of her books.
It's interesting
So
that too, from the perspective of so many evangelical churches, the idea of a woman having so much influence over a church. I'm sure you know,
yeah,
for a lot of evangelical churches, the idea of a woman having almost any power or say or authority, especially over men. I mean, if it's over a
mhm,
ladies group, maybe, but it's pretty much unheard of in a lot of evangelical circles. So it's quite an interesting contrast compared to what I was used to growing up. But
yeah,
it's fascinating. So in this church, you've described it. You were really surrounded by it, meaning like you had it at home, but you had the
mhm,
church, and then you had the school,
school,
all telling you that we have the correct interpretation, not just the Bible and Christianity. We've got the correct version and interpretation of the Bible and
yes.
Christianity. Okay.
Yes, yes. So for us, it was almost like I don't think it's as like I don't say bad, but as much or severe as like Jehovah's Witness or Mormons. Like, because I know I'm not sure exactly where they fall either, but I feel like for them, if you're not a Jehovah's Witness or you're not a Mormon, you're probably going to hell type of thing. For some Adventists, at least the way that I was raised, like I said, if you go in the strictest sense, it might be like that. But the way that I was raised and my belief was that they're even like some non-Seventh Adventists will still make it because it's not necessarily about following the rules. It's about your relationship with God. So my family is and was, but still is, like I said, they're still very active. Really big on having a relationship with God, having your daily devotionals, reading the Bible, stuff like that. It was all about that mostly than anything.
Well, that's
Yeah.
a good place for me to ask a question I ask a lot. And what is the path to have peace with God? If, say, someone comes to the Seventh Day Adventist Church, or back when you were a Christian, if they came to you and said, "Hey, I get it. I'm a sinner. I'm I'm definitely feeling convicted. I feel like I'm living my life for myself, not for the right way. I feel like there's a design, and I'm fighting it. I want to stop fighting it. I want to come back and repent and do the right thing with my Creator. I want to be right with God." What would you have told them? What would your pastor have told them? Is this to say, okay, cool, then let's get to the truth, and the truth about how you get from your sinful state to having peace with God is, what would you all have said?
Hmm. Relationship with God. It's literally you need to make a commitment to not just make it. I guess, like I said, it was very big about relationships, so it has to be a daily thing, not just something that you do on the weekends. Something that is literally a daily thing. You have to be committed, kind of like how if you're in a marriage, you're committed to your wife or your husband, and it's something that you have to work on every single day. That's the same way. So if you're serious about being committed to God, then you need to make it. You need to make a real commitment, making sure you're reading your Bible daily, and obviously they're really big on getting baptized. So that's why I got baptized twice, but we'll get into that later maybe. But
Would they have said you could lose your salvation if you chose to not do some of those things?
oh yeah, you could use lose your salvation the moment you decide, that you no longer want to have a relationship. The way you lose your salvation is pretty much you don't have a relationship with God. You don't care. You're an apostate. Well, actually, I never heard that word before until recently. But you pretty much just are denying God, or you want to live your own life. You want to sin. You want to do whatever. Like that's how you lose your salvation. Just not caring anymore about it.
Gotcha.
So
So very much a non-Calvinistic perspective, like you aren't
mhm.
chosen before the foundation of the world to be a believer.
No,
Okay.
definitely not Calvinistic.
Interesting.
Which
Interesting.
is weird because when I read those passages and when I was, when I my second term in terms of being a Christian when I was older and taking it seriously, reading that passage, it did kind of confuse me sometimes. Like, so Jesus or God knew ahead of time who was going to be saved and who was not going to be saved, but I found some way to reconcile it in my head at the time. So
Yeah. Well, could you
yeah.
tell us more about just what it was like for you personally? Like, what was your experience like, especially, thinking more about the quiet times, when it's just you and God, where you're not in public, no one's looking. Is Cameron being the godly man? Is he doing the right things? Is he taking the Lord's table? Is he praying? But when no one's looking and it's just you talking to God, saying, God, I need your help, I need your direction, I need your peace, I need your guidance, I need to be close to you. What was it like when you were alone with God, either in physically alone or just in your head? Um,
Mhm.
what was your relationship with God like?
Well, I guess it depends. Well, it's probably similar. So there was two versions of my Christianity. One when I was younger, then I went through a phase where I rejected God. I believed in it, but I just willingly rejected it. And then I became a Christian, or I renewed my commitments to God again as an older adult, around 20 years old. So those two times when I was a younger Christian and when I was an older Christian, I guess it's pretty similar, but a lot different though. When I was younger, I did a lot. Actually, I did a lot of praying, reading the Bible, not too much. I mean, I read it for church and for school when I had to, but I didn't have any like daily devotionals. But I did definitely pray a lot because kind of what you mentioned earlier, I did feel like a sinner. I felt like it was one thing I just tried to figure out was why did God create me, to be born in sin? Like I just couldn't understand that concept of like why are we just automatically born a sinner? So I felt like I had a very sinful nature. So I did a lot of praying as a child. Just asking, mostly just asking God to make me not be a sinner anymore. I didn't want to be bad. I always wanted to be good, and it just was frustrating that I felt like I was just automatically bad. So most of my devotion as a child or younger was just constantly just pretty much asking God to help me not be bad, or not to have bad thoughts, or to yeah, just to be internally bad. As an adult, when I recommitted my life to God and got baptized again, it was not so much of that anymore. It was a lot of praying, but it was a lot of, I prayed. Of course, I prayed every day, and I read my Bible every day, and I fasted on the Sabbath. That was my own personal thing. Nobody else I knew did that. I just did that for myself. But it was mostly me trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted from me, and I just wanted to be as close to God as possible. It's kind of hard to explain, but I wanted to, like, I just wanted to have the most closest relationship possible to Jesus as I could, because and understand what he wanted, because I just felt like the more that I saw Christianity and read the Bible, I just felt that there was a disconnect somewhere, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So in my private time, I was trying to, like, kind of push aside sometimes what was being told of me, and just wanted, like, the Holy Spirit to guide me in terms of what um I should be believing, which is another reason why I kind of wasn't really messing with Ellen G. White too much, even though I still consider myself a Seventh Day Adventist. I never denied that. I just didn't really feel like I didn't want Ellen G. White to help me. I wanted God to help me himself. Like, why do I need somebody else to tell me what the Bible's telling me?
Yeah.
I want God to tell me. So that's how
Can I
my
ask,
time was. Yeah.
you mentioned the times when you kind of went away from God and then came back later. Could you give more background of your kind of your life story as to what was prompting those different seasons of life, seasons of faith?
Yes. It was just one time. So pretty much what happened was, it's kind of sad, but I'll try to make it not too sad. But when I was 14 years old, my oldest sister at the time suddenly passed away.
Mm.
It was kind of tragic. Um, yeah. So I was 14 years old. She's my older sister, and before she's only in the hospital for like maybe like 4 days or so. And within those 4 days, I just remember praying. That's when I would pray a lot throughout those 4 days, and I just remember, like, telling God, like, please help my sister. Like, I don't want her to die. Like, please, please, please. And so after she died or whatever, it wasn't like immediate, but after she died. But I remember, I don't want to say who it was because it was a very close family member of mine, but one of my very close family members of mine trying to console me actually made it worse, because they said to me, it was God's will or something like that. Something as long as, like, it was God's will, it was her time. And for me at that young age, that just I couldn't I just couldn't deal with that. So that really messed me up, and that made me very angry at God, because before I didn't even think about that until they said that to me, like, oh, it was God's time or it was her time, God wanted it, whatever. I'm like, why? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. So after that point, after they said that, I kind of got angry with God. And so, like, I still believed in God or whatever, and I still went to church and all that stuff, but I was, like, legitimately mad, like, so angry at God that I didn't want to follow him anymore. I just don't want to mess with him. So I was like, I don't care. I don't care what you want. I don't care. I'm gonna do my own thing. I don't care. And that's funny, because I didn't believe in hell. Like, I know a lot of Christians, they couldn't do that because they believe in hell and they don't want to go to hell. I never had the fear of hell. For me, I was like, I don't care. Just annihilate me, kill me. I don't care. I don't want to go to heaven with you anyways. So you might as well annihilate me. And so that's when I went through that period. I guess it was 5 years, from 14
So
to 20.
it
of
truly
just,
wasn't like that you didn't think he was there. It was just that you thought he was doing you wrong and that you were just
exactly,
more
yeah,
upset at his choices.
exactly.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it was like being mad at your best friend. It's like I was like, I can't even describe to you how angry I was. Like, the amount of, I was like, why did you take her and not me? Like, why her and not me? You should have taken me instead. Like, so I went through a depression like the first year, because it was like she died like literally a few days after my eighth grade graduation. So that summer sucked. My first year of high school sucked, and I didn't really want to talk to anybody. I was kind of like very mentally gothic in that, in terms of that, like, and I kind of like rejected even like my human friends, because I was very depressed, and I was just really mad at God. And after the depression left, well, the major depression, I still had some. I still was rejecting God, because I was like, well, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you now. Because if I believe that Jesus loves me and he wants me to be with him, I'm going to reject you. So now, too bad. And since I don't have a fear of
Yeah.
hell, I have nothing to lose. It's just not going to heaven. Oh, well, I don't want to go to heaven anyways because you suck and you killed my
Yeah.
sister. So that's how I saw it, which is pretty
Mm.
stupid, but that's how I thought of it back then. So
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that, though, the whole thing about people saying it was your sister's time or it was God's will that, that he wanted her home. It's it's amazing when you're in Christianity and you're on the other perspective, maybe not to say that you didn't respond correctly, but just a lot of us responded to losses and pain by truly kind of saying, this is truly a time to say to God, God, I want to be a useful vessel. I want to be an empty vessel. Do whatever it takes to make me holy. If you need to make me a quadriplegic, make me holy. I want to be a useful vessel. I'm clay in your hands. And if you can mold me quickly without hurting me, great. If you need to mold me in a way that hurts me, I'd rather you mold me to the man of God or woman of God I need to be. And there was a lot of that kind of messaging that I heard growing up, like, don't worry about what God gives or takes away. And the metaphor was often like, leave your hands open, let God put stuff in, let God take stuff out. And when he puts stuff in, don't grab it. Just say, thank you, Lord, for what you gave me today. And if you take it away tomorrow, you look back and you're like, that's a very stoic perspective. Like, I don't care if you take stuff away from me. I don't care if I'm deprived, or I don't care if I'm hurt or whatever. But the Stoicism is obviously a big factor in early Christianity and Paul's perspectives, but it really comes out in a lot of kind of holiness circles, not the holiness movement per se, but just people that really try to focus on saying, stop looking at the world, keep your eyes on Christ and the kingdom, whether, no matter what happens, if the worst thing you could imagine happens, just stand up and say, glory be to the King, glory be to the King. I am his slave, I am his servant, Father, do with me what you want. And that is just driven into so many of us in so many circles. And it's fascinating that it was kind of, sounds like you kind of got a taste of what that could have been like, and you said no, which is admirable, really. I mean, that you said, I'm not going there, because someone in my world, the way I was brought up and taught, you had no choice. You had to bow your knee. And the fact that you were willing to say at such a young age, I'm not bowing my knee, this doesn't sound right, even though you weren't taking it to the equation of, your actual total worldview. Just the fact that you had the guts to say, God, I'm not going to take this. What a great expression of your bravery at such a young age. I mean, I wouldn't have done that, and kudos to you.
I don't know if I consider that brave. I just, like I said, I was just very hurt and very angry that God at that time, I believe God took my sister away, and
Yeah.
for no reason. She wasn't sick or anything. It just happened tragically. So I was like,
Hmm.
I just didn't understand. So
Hmm.
yeah.
So you mentioned that later, after your season of kind of saying, God, I'm pissed off at you, and I'm not going to do this way. You said you eventually came back to a strong relationship with God. What were the series of events that kind of brought you back to the Lord, so to speak?
Okay, yeah, it wasn't really series of events. It's actually just one major event. So um it's weird. I had lost a lot of people between that time period, between my sister and what's about to happen. But one of my best friends, it happened my freshman year in college. Mind you, I was going to a secular college. I went to San Diego State University on purpose, for multiple reasons. But I went there mainly just because I was tired of being entrenched in Seventh Day Adventist stuff. So I wanted to actually kind of see what else was out there. So, anyways, that's a side point. But I was going to SDSU, and one of my best friends, once again, tragically, died. So and that was very hard because it was like he had some health condition that we didn't even know about, with his heart. So he was running for track. He was practicing running for track at home with his dad, and then he collapsed, and then that was a wrap. So that was super hard for me. That was extremely hard for me. And so what happened was, at his funeral, um, there was a sermon, um, and it was pretty much, the sermon turned into an altar call, but it was pretty much, first of all, just explaining about his relationship with God, and how we need to get right with the Lord, and the typical thing. And then there was somewhat of an altar call, and it just kept on. I felt, in that environment when everyone's pretty emotional and there's a lot of energy like that. I just felt my heart like I gotta get right. I gotta stop being angry with God, and I do want to see Him again in heaven. I want to see my sister again in heaven. I want to see, and I forgot exactly his words, but I just remember feeling like, it's, I don't know, just not, I guess the anger towards God or the hurt kind of left, and he made me see a bigger picture at the time. So I was like, okay, I'm being ridiculous. I need to, you know, recommit my life. So at that point, that later that day, I just kept thinking about it. It was like harboring on my heart, and then I just like, okay, I need to go back to Jesus. And so that's when I decided to start over again, get rebaptized, and just have a fresh slate with Jesus and start again.
And at that point, would you say that you truly felt like you felt his presence? You know, that he was actually doing stuff in your heart, kind of number one, warming you up to being close to him again, but also just that fervor to you know, spend your life the way he wanted you to.
Most definitely, especially in that funeral. It was like it was weird because the funeral was like a funeral of like for the first half, but like I said, during that sermon, it turned into like church a little bit. And so I really at the time I would have, I mean, I wouldn't say this, but back then I felt like the Holy Spirit was really, you know, pushing on my heart. And so I really did feel at the time that, you know, God, Jesus, whatever you want to call it, was, you know, pulling on my heartstrings to recommit my life. So I was like, okay, yeah, I need to stop messing around and get
Mm.
back.
And once you were at that point, this was around your freshman year of college, you said?
Yeah, I was like about 20 years old, 19, 20.
How long were you in that frame of mind where you were, you know, kind of back with Jesus, for lack of a
Mhm.
better phrase? Um, how long were you in that frame of mind before something changed?
So it's so ironic. So it's hilarious actually. So when I went to San Diego State, I was majoring in I forgot what I was majoring in. It was computer engineering. But I didn't really want to be a computer engineer, but I just didn't want to. It's dumb to do, but I didn't want to go to college without a major. So I just chose computer engineering because I really love computers and technology. I really didn't even know what it was about. Anyways, long story short, after that happened, I wanted to change my major. Not really knowing what I was getting myself into, I changed my major to religious studies. So keep this in mind. I'm going to San Diego State University and I'm majoring in religious studies. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I thought that it was going to be like learning more about the Bible. I didn't know. I didn't think it was going to be what it was. So I majored in that. And I mean, I could just tell you, obviously, here I am today, right? But so yeah, from age 20 to 23, pretty much, it was my entire deconversion, or some of you guys call it deconstruction now. It was it started from like literally my first class, the first day. I immediately knew, I was like, oh my goodness, I made a mistake, because the whole class was filled with Christians, and it was pretty much the first class I took was called Exploring the Bible, and that was my faith was completely shaken, and the entire 3 years of me studying not just Christianity and the Bible, what made it I'm summarizing, which I shouldn't, but which made it so hard was I was learning things not just about like the history of the Bible and the contextual criticism, the historical stuff. I'm learning about other religions as well, about Confucianism and Taoism and Jainism. I'm learning about, you know, Islam and Judaism. I'm going to, you know, uh, I even went to a Jewish synagogue one time for one of my classes, and so I'm just being pretty much like the opposite of being entrenched in with a Seventh Day Adventist. Now I'm like from all different directions, getting like all this stuff from different religions. And for me, I don't even know how to make this long story short. I'm trying, but what
No, you
happened was
feel free
that
to. You don't have to make it short. Tell us all the details.
well, it's so many details. It's 3 years, but or a little bit more. But what happened was that okay,
It'll be a
I'm
long interview,
seeing.
10-hour interview.
What I'm seeing is that okay, I'm getting all these, I'm finding out a lot of stuff about the Bible that I didn't know about before, and that was hard. Like, I was a Christian who believed that Genesis was the first book written, and literally the Bible was in chronological order, that, you know, Genesis was the first and Revelation was second. I mean, it was last, and that was what it is. Then I'm finding out that's not the case, that actually, um, who was the first book written? Oh, Job was written first, and then all these beliefs that I had were completely shattered. I'm finding out about the other, pretty much like the context in which each book was actually written, and the surrounding books that obviously I didn't learn about in my Seventh Day Adventist school, and kind of like I mean to summarize pretty much all the stuff that, Dr. Josh Bowen understands, stuff like that, Dr. Kip, all that stuff like that. I'm learning all this stuff, and I'm sitting here like mentally trying to still hold on to my faith and try to piece it together and make excuses and rationalizations and trying to harmonize myself. And it might have worked. I probably could have convinced myself to keep believing, but there's too many other straws that broke my camel's back in terms of faith and when it came to learning about the other Eastern religions. Because when you learn about their religions and you see how they kind of evolve from one version to the next, how like Buddhism kind of was an upshoot off of Hinduism, and then even you see how Buddhism changes as it moves from location to location. So like Buddhism in Japan is way different from Buddhism in China. You learn about Taoism and Confucianism, and so you're learning about all these different things. And I'm seeing a parallel between that and then how kind of like how Judaism was transforming and changing, and to Christianity. It's like the same thing. Like literally, it's like the same stuff, just different religions. And I'm sitting here like, uh-oh, like this is making too much sense, and it was frustrating me. So I would do a lot of my own research. I would go home to my dorm and research. Mind you, I didn't have YouTube back then. This was like in 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, those times. So I'm online, but I don't have YouTube videos back then. So, or they did, but I don't know. So I'm trying to find answers, and I'm not finding anything good at all. Like all these answers are trash. So then I have to come up with my own answers, which were better, but still not good enough. And then I'm realizing I'm making up my own answers. But what really hit me even more was when I'm in my Islamic studies class, and they're going through the same thing that I was going through when I'm in my exploring the Bible class, and I'm getting my Bible just ripped to shreds and my faith like ripped to shreds. And then I'm seeing them go through the same thing, and they're making, sorry to say, but they're making like the same type of excuses and rationalizations for why these passages might say these horrible, terrible things. Oh no, but it doesn't mean that. You have to interpret it. And they're doing the same thing that I'm doing. And I'm sitting here like, oh my goodness, I'm sounding just like them. So it's like I'm literally living like the outsider's test for faith in real life, because I'm sitting here in classes with people of different faiths, getting their, books torn apart, and them trying to reconcile it on their own. And I'm doing the same thing with mine. I'm realizing like, wait a minute, I'm like, why am I going through all of this to try to fix the Bible when they're doing the same thing? And mind you, at the same time, I'm still reading my Bible every single day. I'm still having my daily devotions and stuff like that. And so a lot of my nights, I'd be sitting, in my room, like praying and crying, like, God, please help me. Like, and I was getting frustrated. Like, God, why aren't you helping me? Why aren't you helping me find these answers? Like, you want to lose me? Like, why do you want to lose me? Don't you want to keep me? Like, I'm running out of, out of excuses here. Like, I need some help. Like, I feel like I'm doing this all by myself. Like, give me something, and I was getting nothing, and I kept on praying and praying, and I kept on trying. It felt like it literally felt like I was like sinking in quicksand of disbelief, and I'm trying to grab onto any branch or stick I could grab, and every time I would grab a branch, it would snap and break. And I'm sitting here like, okay, God, I'm slipping. You better hurry up and get me, because I don't know what to do. And there's so many theological issues and historical issues, and there's so much stuff that I literally just remember the time where I was trying to pray, and I really felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not praying to anything anymore. Like I really, like, it was like in the middle of a prayer, and I realized I'm not praying to anything. That's how it felt. It really felt like the faith just left me. Like, not that I left the faith, but that the faith left me. Like it just vanished, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I didn't even know what to do at that time. At that point, I'm sitting here like, and I went through all this by myself. Like my entire family still, they didn't know what I was going through. None of my friends knew I was going through, and I'm sitting here because at the time too, I was like considered like, I don't want to say like the religious guru, but like a lot of my families and friends, they would come to me for like spiritual guidance, or because they knew I knew the Bible so well because I'd read it like 5 times through from cover to cover. So they would come to me. So now what am I supposed to do when all these people are counting on me for like, biblical and theological help, and I'm over here like losing my faith? Like it was really hard situation to go through. And I kind of went MIA for a while after that, because I was like, I didn't want to talk to anybody, because I felt bad, and I knew that nobody would believe me, that I legitimately tried this hard to hold on to my faith, and I lost it. Because as you probably know, growing up in a Christian household, like you're taught to believe that if people leave the faith, it's because they want to, right? I never thought once that anybody left the faith. Exactly. I never thought that anybody left the faith because of legit reasons. It's just because, oh, I want to sin, or I just want to do my own thing. So for me to go through this, at the end, I was like, there's no way anyone's gonna believe that I legitimately tried so hard. Like, so I just kind of just, it is what it is. And to this day, like I said, my whole entire family, I don't think that they actually know why I don't believe. I don't think they even know that I really don't believe. I think that they think I believe, but that I just am just rejecting it. I don't think that they honestly think that I legitimately don't believe at all. Like, I think it's all myth and just ridiculous that anybody believes any of it, honestly. So
You've said so many
yeah.
good things there. I want to unpack so many of them, but it's just that's fantastic. The details you gave there. I wanted to at least highlight a few things real quick. Number one, what a great job you're doing at saying, look, the apologists, the defenders of the Christian faith, they will claim to have answers. Of course, they will say, if you really love the Lord, that basically you have no reason to truly doubt. And if there's anything that kind of comes up as even a possibility of a doubt, then all you really need, truly what you need, is just some better information. And so, for example, if you're looking at the Noah story and someone's trying to convince you it's a copy from the Epic of Gilgamesh, or you're reading something else and like the Genesis story where it talks about creation, and they're trying to point out that there's two different stories here woven together very poorly. The apologists are going to say, well, there's an answer to that, and if you truly have an open heart, open mind, a soft heart for the Lord, we can give you answers. But if you're hell bent, so to speak, although that means less for a Seventh Day Adventist, but if you're hell bent on walking away and then not believing, then this won't make too much sense to you. And there's always some kind of way where they can kind of twist your motivations and twist your attitude, your perspective, just your skepticism, your inquisitiveness, and say, like, look, we have answers. All you need to do is actually do the research. We've got it already. There are great men and women of God who've gone down these same halls, who've had their faith tested, and they came out stronger than ever because there are great answers. And
Yeah.
for people to be able to look at that and say, like you did, actually, no, you do have answers. That's for sure. You've got a lot of answers. You got endless books. You Christians write books faster than anyone else. But the answers you give aren't very good. And in fact, the more that I look, the worse your answers look. And the more they look like they are stretching it. And for some of them, they even look like they're literally making it up, or they're charlatans or connivers. Some of them are lying, or they're leaving critical information out. And I've seen apologists over and over do this, and it just breaks my heart that there are Christians who will look at this stuff and say, with such a simplicity, I mean, they really try to nail home, you just have to have a simple faith and almost like a simple mindset, and just turn your eyes to Jesus, and he will help you to see. And especially when you have an emotional connection to it, where it's like, everyone around you believes too. And if you leave, it's going to be so painful, and everyone's going to think you're weird and wrong and sinful. And so there's this pressure, but also just this sense of like, if you do this, you understand that you're actually, like, if you don't bow your knee to God in the way that they would describe, meaning we have answers and they're good answers, and even if we don't have good answers, you still need to bow your knee to God. The paradigm that they set up is one where you truly have no choice but to say this book is divine. There's no other alternative. If you don't say the Bible is divine, God, Yahweh is God, Jesus is his son, he's the path to salvation. If that is not your outcome, you are truly being tempted by the devil. You're listening to the world. You're listening to your flesh, probably. You're probably pushing yourself towards sinfulness, and you just want to disobey God. You just want to have a hard heart. And they'll even warn you, like, look, if you do this, if you have a cold heart toward God, where God's saying, be warm to my spirit, be warm to my invitation, I'm calling you. And if you say, no, 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 thank you, that coldness is your choice. But they often will phrase it like, if you choose to do that, God will punish that by giving you hardness, where right now you can choose to walk away. Later on, you have to choose to walk away, because God won't give you any more warmth. He will make your heart so hard you can't even hear his voice anymore. And they paint it in such a way as like, don't go near it. There are warnings even like, but where it talks about the unpardonable sin. If you attribute, the miracles of Jesus to the devil, this is an unpardonable sin. Don't get close to this point. Stop doubting. And for you to be able to say that you gave yourself that freedom to say, I doubt that this is actually reality. Not, you aren't just doubting maybe this interpretation of this passage is wrong, but maybe the whole thing is a house of cards that's falling apart. I mean, that's going back to what I said a little bit ago. That's some serious bravery. I mean, were you tempted at all to think, what if this is just me giving God the middle finger, when in reality, I know deep down inside, I just want to sin? Like, was that even remotely on your radar?
Well, it's funny you said a couple of things that I thought about initially when I first had my first class. I told you, exploring the Bible, which was completely like, whoa. I approached it when I was getting all this information that I had learned that kind of went against what I was taught growing up. My first reaction, actually, my first reaction was shock. My second reaction was, okay, this is the devil, this is Satan trying to confuse me, trying to trick me, and I don't want to get tricked. So I thought of it as a way to build my faith. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this. And I'm not, a lot of Christians actually left that class because it was a lot. Like I'm telling you, it was really hard. So a lot of Christians left the class, but I didn't want to. I was like, no, I'm going to, if Christianity is true and my beliefs are true, then I'm going to I'm going to stick through this, and I'm going to build my faith. I'm just going to have stronger faith than I did before. And that's kind of how I approached it. Instead of just being scared and leaving, I'm like, no, this. I even told my professor. I told her, I was like, this is gonna help me strengthen my faith. And she actually was a big part of it, because she convinced me to look up Christian apologists and scholars, because one thing that confused me was like, how could so many people who are Christians, who are smart, believe this stuff when it's clearly, like, to me it was like almost clear as day that it's wrong. So that's kind of what held me to keep trying so hard as well, because like there's a lot of smart, really, really smart people believe this. So like, how could all these people believe this stuff and it's not true? So like and so she was like, okay, we'll go check out what their reasonings are. And literally, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've heard of Pelagia's
Yeah.
his what happened with him with Ken Ham, and one of the worst arguments. He's like, oh my goodness, this is trash. It was kind of like that with me with a lot of things. Like when I'm looking at their answers, I was like, this cannot be the best answer. Like this, I think his was like the kangaroo thing, like they float on rafts to get to it. Like that's ridiculous. Like when I'm seeing some of their explanations, I'm like, this can't be it. Like this is terrible. This is not even an answer. And so I keep looking for different. And then the worst part of it too is that almost every Christian website would have different answers. So even the Christians aren't even agreeing on how to reconcile this problem, and all of all their attempts to reconcile it were not even good enough. So I'm like, that's why it was getting hard for me, because I was like, the Christians have terrible answers, but their answers aren't even matching each other's answers. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what am I supposed to do? And that's the thing. So they blame the deconverts for leaving, like we just don't want to believe, but they can't get their story straight on their own. Like, how do you expect anyone to believe this? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's too much.
And I think too, the combination of that dynamic with the dynamic that there is so much information that they just withhold from people,
Oh yeah.
and some of them I'm sure just are oblivious to it. But for example, the idea of that there weren't four gospels, but there were like 60 or more. It wasn't one book of Acts, there was at least six. The endless epistles, many of
Mhm.
them even written in names of the apostles, and where people were trying to get people to respect the authority of some apostle's name, and that that these books that were surreptitiously sent around to those churches, some of them appear to have been accepted into the canon. Like it looks like the pastoral
Yeah.
epistles were written in Paul's name and they weren't from Paul. And again, I'm not
Mhm.
trying to debate that point, but most scholars that aren't fundamentalists would agree with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But just there's so much information, and for me recently, and I want to dive into this too, but just to point out these two things, for me, two of the biggest ones that really really rocked my world were understanding that so many of the stories in the Gospels were copied directly from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and
Oh yeah.
from Virgil's Aeneid and Euripides' Bacchae. Realizing that these were literal copies, and you can see it once you dive in. You're like, oh my goodness, these are Homeric epics rewritten. That was eye-opening beyond words. And then the other part of it was I had heard the name Enoch, but I'd never read the book. I'd never knew much about it. And then learning that the New Testament quotes it.
Yep.
I've come up to about 150 quotes so far, where it's quoting it in the New Testament. But for most Christians, they would say, well, it quotes it twice in like Jude and First or Second Peter, and they explain that away. But the idea of Christians not even knowing, do you realize that a lot of times when you think you're listening to Jesus, you're listening to Enoch? That knowledge, knowing that, just that, even if you end up, like some Christians will say, well, that doesn't destroy my faith. That just means Enoch should have been in the canon. The Christians who took Enoch out were wrong. So Christians explain stuff like that away. It's not like that's necessarily faith destroying, but the idea that God can't be clear, like for generations, and that the Ethiopian church has never lost Enoch. They've had Enoch forever.
That's
They
what I'm
still have
saying.
it.
Yep. They still use Enoch. Yeah.
They still use it. But knowing that you have a Bible as a Protestant evangelical Christian who you don't know where it comes from. You don't know what it's
Nope.
quoting. You don't know that it's quoting Homer and Euripides. You don't know it's quoting Enoch. The fact that Christians don't know this, once, regardless of what you do with it, whether you say, well, Enoch should be canonical or not, whatever you do with it, the fact that Christians by and large have no idea where it came from, that fact alone is enough for a lot of us to shake us up and say, wow, like we don't know what we're actually putting our faith in. Like this is just
Yep.
crazy. This is like, like we're putting our faith on a table with no legs. Like we have to know what's behind all this. And I'll add this and then pass the ball back to you, but not knowing how it's been edited and redacted and changed over the
Yeah.
years, like who has been in control of this canon all this time? Number one, who decided which books get in? And of those books that they decided, well, they were going to have these books and not those books. How do we know that those books haven't been edited and redacted before the church even got to them? And
Exactly.
which version are they using? Which, why? And what are the changes that have occurred? But then once that happens, you have the church making manipulations for political reasons and power reasons. And things,
Yeah.
some books going in and out. The Gospel of Mark wasn't even accepted for a long time. Enoch was accepted by many.
Yeah.
Revelation wasn't accepted by many. Hebrews wasn't accepted by many. James wasn't accepted.
Yeah.
It's like, how are we? Who are these men? And always men. Who are these men
Always
deciding these things? It's like we're inheriting what happened thousands of years ago by people that we don't even know most of their names. We don't know what they stood for. We don't know what they were doing, what their private sins were. What were they doing that caused them to vote this way or that way when they were making these decisions? It's like, just regardless of the content of people's faith and the content of the Bible, knowing that most Christians have no idea where it came from is enough. I think that it should shake you up. And I think most Christians would say, God gave us the book. I believe it. That settles it. It's like, that's not a good answer.
No, because you could literally say that about any book.
Yeah.
Once faith has to become any part of it, then you can use that to justify any book. And that's what I realized when I'm over here trying to make excuses for all the problems that were in the Bible, which were like mountains and mountains of them. I was like, there's no, and it took me, when I stopped believing, I wanted to say I was 100% sure it wasn't true, but I tried to give myself some wiggle room. I was okay, I'm 99.99999% sure that this is not true. I was like, there's no way this Bible could be any type of word of God. There's no way. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see it. Not at
When you
all.
were thinking that too, did it ever hit you like, is this the best that a God could do? Like, couldn't a God, if the God really was the most brilliant, amazing mathematician and artist and poet, perfect in every way, is this the best he could do? Did it ever strike you that way?
Not until more recently. I honestly, I never even thought of that. I just was thinking humans are just, from when I left, or when the faith left me, I should say, and I kind of stepped away. And after learning all these other religions, I kind of was like, everyone believes in something, but everyone's making something up. So I kind of was like a super agnostic. I was like, maybe there's something there, because it's clearly that all these people are making something up, but they're clearly making something up. So I'm like, I don't think that there's a necessarily a God, like a tangible physical deity that everyone's saying that there is, but there might be something, but there's definitely not none of this stuff. And but those exact that thought you said, I never really thought of that until more recently. And that's probably only because I was watching one of I don't know if you know Vice the Rhino's videos, but he made a video sort of like that about how this all knowing God make a book pretty much so confusing, and you're not supposed to be author of confusion, but look, clearly it's confusion, so you must not be the author then. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious, did the moral atrocities issue come up at all during your deconversion? The whole, what's God doing, saying kill everybody, including women and children?
Yeah, that was actually one of the big ones. There was a couple of really big ones that hurt me, but that was one of them. Because growing up, you read those stories in the Bible, and then we're always taught like, oh, that's just in their context and their time, so you just kind of keep going with life. But as I am, that was actually one of the huge sticks that broke my back. Was I was like I said, when I was in my Islamic studies class and we had to read the Quran, I'm over here reading the Quran and reading these terrible things about kill the infidel and all this stuff. And I'm saying like, this is terrible. And then obviously the Muslims in the class are trying to like justify like, no, it doesn't mean that, and they're trying to explain it away. And then on my own devotion, this I'm saying it's ironic because I'm reading the Bible on my own, like for my own personal daily devotion. And it just so happened that I think I was in somewhere in the Old Testament, maybe Judges or Samuel. I don't remember which book I was reading at the time, but whatever it was God commanding something terrible, something killing people, whatever. And I'm sitting here like reading it, and then my mind has automatically been trained at the time to like make it make sense. And then as soon as I did that, and I was making an excuse in my head for why it's saying that, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, why is it okay for God to command that then, but not now? Like, if I were to go over to somebody and slash their throat and said, well, God told me to do it, nobody would believe me. Like, you're crazy. God would never tell you to do that. But back then, apparently God told people to do that all the time. So what changed? Like, all of a sudden God's moral changed? I thought God never changes, but clearly he does, because it's okay to rape and murder and pillage and all that stuff back then. Why isn't that okay now? Why would God? Oh no, God would never say. But yeah, he did say that. So that was very confusing. So I saw a very inconsistent God character in the Bible. That I was having a hard time reconciling that. That was one of the bigger sticks. Another big stick to it, which I wanted to mention, was the passage in Matthew where where Jesus is telling his disciples about all the end things that are going to happen when he's going to return again. And he said, some of you guys will not taste death, and da 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 da. And then obviously they're all dead now. And I remember that's one of the passages where I'm trying to read up and try to find an excuse for why it says that, and I could not find anything that made any sense. And so for me, it was like, if I have a relationship with Jesus, it's like I feel like he lied to me. Like, why would you say that if it's not true? Like growing up, the excuse that I was given for that was that, well, I think it was later on in John or whatever, where Jesus says, well, nobody knows the day or the hour, not even the Son knows, only the Father knows. And then I was like, and back then I guess that was sufficient, but now when I was older, I was like, but then why say that? Why make that statement that some of you guys will not taste death if that's not true? Just don't say it, because that means you just lied. That means Jesus lied to me. So like, why would you lie? And that was another one of the really big issues that I had as well, theologically, with the Bible.
Yeah, ditto for me. It's amazing when you look back at it. Like once you're out, things just seem so much clearer. You're like, what was I thinking? And it's you feel bad though, because you can apply that then to the people that are still in it. We both have families still in it, and to think, I'm surprised that it's not more obvious to you all that this is really ridiculous. But I can also understand it because like I was there. But it's frustrating because you're like one of the issues, the whole idea of slaughtering babies. Christians in the groups that I was really running with, they were very much like, oh, God is so pro-life. God is so pro-life. He loves the babies. And then you go back and you read it, and it's like he drowned all these babies in the flood, and then he kills the firstborn of Egypt, and then he's slaughtering the Canaanite babies, and then he even gives a magic abortion dust water recipe for how to, if you're jealous that your wife might have slept around. how to abort that baby through this dust potion. Like, God had several chances to say, I am pro-life, don't kill babies. And across the board, it's kill the babies. Blessed are the ones who dash your enemies' children's heads against the
Oh yeah.
rocks. And you're like, this God is very sick and psychotic. And a lot of people point out, and I don't think I ever said this way, but I appreciate the notion. So like, look, if this God had been real, we'd be obligated to fight it, not to worship it. Like,
Right. That's what I'm saying.
it's just, and the idea too of like, God is this good father. I don't know if what your worship songs were like in the Seventh Day Adventist Church, but this idea of God is such a good father, and our
Hmm.
Father who art in heaven, from the Lord's Prayer,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and yet he's not a good father. Like, you think, what father would do you have children, by the way?
No.
But you imagine if you had, say you got a 5-year-old kid and he disobeys you. Just imagine you know what a cast iron pan is. Say you've got this cast iron pan that you just have been cooking dinner in, and it's piping hot. You still have the stove on high, and you take his fingers and you touch his fingers to this pan, even just for a millisecond. He'd have blisters all over his fingers. He'd be screaming in pain. You'd obviously, be, hopefully, anyone that would do that would be in big trouble. But just think, any father that would burn his kid's fingers for a millisecond on purpose is sick and psychotic, and just a horrible person who should not be near children. You could not imagine any good father burning his children. And yet this God says, if you don't bow your knee to me, and like, I love you so much, but if you don't love me back, I will burn you forever. And I know Seventh Day Adventists don't say that, but there are a lot of passages that do indicate that there's a burning fire, and
Hmm.
he certainly threatens that. Even if it's a metaphor, he threatens it as if it were a
Hmm.
fire. And it's like,
Hmm.
what's your good God going to do? And with the Israelites, it's funny, in the New Testament, Jesus says, if 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 you as a kid ask your dad for some food, is he just going to give you a stone? Like, he's going to give you bread. He's not going to give you a stone. And he says, what if you ask for more food? Is he going to send you a viper instead to bite you? Well, that's exactly what happened in the Old Testament, which, the Jews at one point were grumbling, saying, God, we're hungry, thirsty, and he sends them this food, and it says immediately he sends vipers to kill them. It's like,
Yeah.
your God is a psycho, and he's also, obviously, more than that, he's sadistic, and he's also very what's the word? Just self-absorbed. Worship me, worship me, worship me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you end up getting to a point where to me at least, you start saying, this just this doesn't sound right anymore. I mean, did you ever kind of say that to yourself, like, this just doesn't sound right anymore?
Yeah, right at the end, at the very end, when I finally let it go, I went through probably like another year of just keep on reading. I just got obsessed with it because now that I wasn't afraid and I didn't believe it, I just kept on reading. I remember I wrote that down somewhere too. Like, one of the biggest Christian things, at least in my realm, was, we want to be like God, right? Because God is perfect. We want to be like God. And I'm saying, and kind of like what you said, if you have a child, I was like, so the reason why God created us was just so we could worship him. Like, imagine me creating beings for the sole purpose of them loving me, but then they also have to worship me. And if they don't, then I'm gonna kill them. Like, I couldn't, I was like, this makes no sense. Like, this is not good. And then the whole thing too of, I know Pine Creek always talks about, why did God create? I never took it that far back, but I took it as far back as only, why did God put humans in the situation that they did, in terms of, Lucifer was able to rebel on his own. Like, wasn't tempted. He just said, okay, screw you, God, I'm out. Right. But why would God, if that happened before the creation of humans, which I was taught was, why would you add more to an already bad situation? Why would you add creatures when there's already sin involved, and then put them in a place where they're tempted? You didn't just, like, banish Satan somewhere else. You literally put, supposedly, I guess, I know originally that wasn't supposed to be the devil, but Christian theology, whatever, put Satan in a place to tempt the humans. Like, that's like putting us at a more disadvantage already. So to me, even that didn't make sense. I was like, this is such a terrible, terrible story. Like, I don't see how I don't see how anybody could make sense of it. And I hear Christians try to, but none of it really, it doesn't really make sense to me. It all seems like a lot of special pleading. Because
Yeah.
if there was the same stuff in another religion, they wouldn't go through such great lengths to try to make it make sense. If this was part of Islam, they would be like, they would agree with me. They'd be like, yeah, that's terrible. But because it's part of their own beliefs, then they're gonna go through, you know, whatever they can to try to make it not sound as terrible as it is. And then also at the same time say, because we're not Christian, we don't have any moral foundation for what's good or bad. So we have no right to say that any of this stuff is bad, because who are we to, judge God, because God is whatever. Um, and I don't even get me started on the moral problem, because to me, Christians shouldn't even use morality as anything. Because
Yeah.
according
If
to the
you,
Bible, there is no clear structure of what morality is in terms of what's good or bad, because God could do both
yeah.
bad and good stuff, apparently. So
Oh, I totally agree. I'm so on board with you on that. It is crazy. The idea of if you have a book that endorses genocide, land theft, slavery, child brides, misogyny, endless bad stuff, stoning, just even tribalism, we're better than you. And if you don't bow, you need
yeah.
us, we're going to slaughter you and your kids. Just the
Hmm.
endless bad stuff that they would actually claim to have any kind of moral high ground is just so laughable. It's really crazy.
It's
Um,
crazy to me. When I watch Frank Turk or anybody, I'm just like, I just want to pull my ears off. I was like, I cannot. I was like, how? Like, I just can't deal with it.
yeah.
It's crazy.
And when you look at people like that, the apologists, but even just average people, they're just agreeing and saying, "Yeah, I agree with Frank Turek or whatever, William Lane
Mhm.
Craig." You realize this stuff, this religious stuff, it is really dangerous. Like it's powerful, but it's dangerous. And you could say, well, it gives some people meaning, hope, and meaning, hope, and purpose, whatever. But I feel really bad for the people for whom it shakes them up, and when they realize this is mythology, they've realized like, well, am I nihilistic now? Do I have even a purpose? If I'm just an evolved primate, there's not really a purpose to all this. Any purpose that I come up with is one that I just come up with. It's not given to me. And so I've got nothing really to fulfill. If I die as a hedonist or I die as a philanthropist, it doesn't really matter because I'm just you know, I'm just an evolved primate. And they kind of get shaken up by it. And I feel bad that shakeup occurs sometimes. It's important to go through it. But at the same time, feeling bad for people that have a rough time deconverting, for every one of those, there's an awful lot of other people who are being converted as children and indoctrinated and
Yeah.
being told there's a God who loves you, but he hates you and he sees everything you're thinking and you're sinful, you're bad, you're wicked, there's nothing good in you. It's, all your righteousness is like a filthy rag and you need Christ. And the fact that they do this to kids is just to me a mind-bogglingly horrific, and especially when you realize, like you're saying, um, they can't see it. You realize this stuff is like, how would I put it? It's like dynamite for kids. It's like you don't do it. You don't give kids dynamite. I mean, you don't even give them matches most of the time. And it's like they're just doing this and then hoping it turns out okay, and then it doesn't turn out okay, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what have we done? And I'm kind of like, I know that we don't want to act like angry atheists. We don't want to be out there just trying to make everybody else look stupid. My goal is definitely not to be snarky all the time or to be telling everybody they're idiots, because if I had that response from atheists, it would have turned me off. I don't want to do that. I want to be as gracious as I can. But at the same time, there's a part of me that wants to be a bit of a fighter in this and say, you can't just keep hurting the kids with these mythological lies. You just can't. And I'm sure if you have kids, if that's in your future in the cards, sure you know what I mean when you say like protecting kids' minds is so critical.
Yeah. It's like teaching kids how to think instead of what to think. That's what I'm big on. But at the same time, like it's frustrating to me because, like I said, my entire family, I'm super close to my family, and it's hard for me because, like I said, they super believe this. Like, it's hard, and I have little ones that are growing up in my family, like nieces and stuff like that, that are, I hate to use the word indoctrination, but that's what it is. They're being indoctrinated. And I know in terms of the parents, they're thinking they're doing the right thing because they want to make sure their child goes to heaven. They're thinking, so
Yeah.
they're in their mindset, they're not doing a bad thing, they're doing a good thing. They're trying to do what the Bible is telling them, is raise a child in the way it should go, right? But I see it as you're not giving them a chance. Like, you're not really giving them a real chance because you're only giving them one side of the story. Like if your religion is true, if your beliefs are true, then you shouldn't be afraid to let them explore and read other things and see what the opposing side is saying. So you can believe what you want to believe, fine, but at least let them know what. Because for me, I didn't know anything. Like I feel so embarrassed about my beliefs when I was a Christian. I really thought other religions came out of the Tower of Babel. I thought the Tower of Babel was true. I thought all the religions like Buddhism and also I thought that all sprang out after God switched the languages, everyone spread out, and then now we have. I didn't realize that there was other scriptures that were written way before the Bible. Like it's really embarrassing how much I used to love Kent Hovind. He was like my hero back when I was like, it's embarrassing. So, and I hate to say that, but it's the truth. So I just feel like if whatever you believe, you really think it's the truth, then you shouldn't be afraid to let, your little ones read other things and find out what the opposing side is saying. But at the same time, I think they'll see what's the truth, because my main thing was all you need to do is read the Bible. The Bible is enough to realize it's not true. Because that's what pushed me over the edges. When you read the Bible over and over again, you start seeing more and more mistakes. I'm sitting here thinking like, what is this? Like, this is garbage. Like, it's crazy.
With your
And
loved
it's
ones,
frustrating.
do you feel like they have an understanding of some of the basics of where it came from? Like, just
No.
pulling one out of the hat. If you said, the Lord, like L-O-R-D is the word Yahweh, and Yahweh originally was the son of Elyon, and Elyon had a wife named Asherah, and eventually they merged Yahweh and Elyon so that Yahweh had an Asherah, a wife, and then they dropped her. So it was just like, do they even get some of the basics
None of that. I'm telling you, it's literally just if you go to the Seventh Day Adventist website and you read their doctrine, that's pretty much all they probably know. Like they might, I think there's some apologists, but they like to read. Like I know some of my family members, they love C.S. Lewis. I don't think he's an apologist per se, but C.S. Lewis. And I can't remember which one it was. It's who's it? Cold Case Detective dude. Oh man, I forgot his name. You know the
know what I
cold
mean?
case? Because there's two of them. It's not Lee Strobel, but it's the other one. Either one, I can't remember which one it was, but I think there's another one they like to read. So they're pretty much they're only reading stuff from one side. So the only arguments that they'll know are from the one side. Like the only contradictions in the Bible that I knew growing up was the two creation stories. I was taught that early and young. But they're not two creation stories. It's just that there's one, and then there's one that's just an explanation of the other. And then the only other contradictions that I was aware of as a child, but they told me the reason why is in the Gospels, how they have a little bit different stuff about where the ladies come to the tomb or whatever. And that's pretty much all I knew growing up. I didn't know anything else. And the reason I was told for that was just because, different eyewitnesses will see different things and have a different opinion. So I actually thought that they were eyewitnesses. I literally thought the Gospels were Matthew writing Matthew, Mark writing Mark. I really thought that. And when I found out that we don't even know who wrote those books, that they're written in Greek, not even in the language that they would have spoken. Like it's all such a big mess. It's like it's laughable, and it's laughable that anybody believes it. And that's why I was so confused. Like, how could all these really, really intelligent people believe this stuff? Like, I don't get it. Because it's not like, it's not like, I don't know. I understand them wanting to believe it, but I wanted to believe it too. Like I wanted to believe it. I tried hard, but it's like the facts are the facts. Like it's clearly made up. So how do they convince themselves to still believe it when I don't get it. Like that's one thing I just still can't wrap my mind around is that a lot of very, very intelligent people will fight to death to try to prove that the Bible is true when I feel like it's not even that hard to realize it's not.
Yeah, it's definitely, the holes are there.
I
And
don't know.
even if you didn't dive into the history behind all of it, just the philosophy, like you're talking about the Garden of Eden thing, like
Yeah.
going back to the example of, a good father, like if you knew, like say you had a fenced in backyard and you knew that there was like a hole in the fence, and that your next door neighbor had just told you that he had just brought home a dog from the pound, but that the dog needed to be rehabilitated, but that the dog was very, very vicious. Like he was known for attacking people. Like, why would you send your kids out to play in that yard knowing there's a hole in the fence, knowing there's a rabid dog next door? You just wouldn't do it, especially if that dog, like, you knew the history behind it. This dog had, meaning Satan had just said no to God and had done all these horrible things. Like, what father is going to send the kids out to this yard to play in the yard with the dog next door, knowing that the outcome is going to be absolutely horrific under any circumstance? That dog
Yeah.
will be in the yard. There is a hole. The dog will come over and attack. How are you a good father? And then the idea that, like, you framed them, like if you say, well, it's your fault that the dog attacked you, kids, Sally and Johnny, like, why were you so stupid to let this dog attack you? Like, the daddy framed the kids. He framed them. Eve was certainly framed, but Adam was framed too, in a sense. It's like, you frame these people and blame them for setting this whole thing up. And this, that's ignoring the Homeric epics. That's ignoring
Mhm.
Zoroastrianism. It's ignoring Greco-Roman mystery cults. All that stuff. Just staying in the Bible. It's a horrible story.
Yeah, and I didn't think about it until recently because when they were talking about Adam and Eve got punished for doing something that they didn't really even know was wrong, right? If they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, how do they know that disobeying God was evil? You know what I'm saying? Like how? So they got, and then stuff that's not even in the Bible, but we made up, like all these. Also, that means not only did like, God just said that there will surely die. Obviously, they didn't die that day. Whatever, they can make whatever excuse they want to, but God didn't say that now animals are going to hunt other animals and there's going to be prey and predator. That He didn't go into the whole long list of all these other things that Christians try to use as, oh, now we have all these problems because of the fall of Adam and Eve. God, that never in the Bible doesn't say any of that. Literally, it only says that you will surely die, and then the whole serpent, being on his belly thing. But that's it. But now, because of sin, now we have cancer and disease and earthquakes and all this other stuff. And, you know, none of that's in the Bible. You just making stuff up at this point.
I love to focusing on, since we're talking about the absurdities, just the idea of forgiveness. Like, this
Yeah.
God, he cannot forgive unless he has blood. Like,
Right?
what does blood have to do with forgiveness? And
That's a good
regardless of
question.
that too, the idea of God saying, like, you must forgive, you must forgive. If you don't forgive, you're not going to get into heaven. You must forgive. And then he, as the prime example, says, but by the way, if you don't love me back, I will never forgive you. I mean, like, at
Yeah.
what point do we say this sounds exactly like what you'd expect if you had a bunch of misogynistic, violent men living in tents in, whatever, the Bronze Age, trying
Hmm.
to defend their violence, trying to
Hmm.
steal people's land and try to
Hmm.
get people to be okay with it, in some sense,
Hmm.
trying to fight for their power. This sounds exactly like what they would come up with. And
Yeah.
especially people entrenched in coming out of the Egyptian mythologies, which is where a lot of this, in Sumerian, where it came from. The Egyptians had blood magic. The Egyptians had circumcision. They had a pork taboo. I mean, where do we think this stuff came from? And you get tribal people with that background who were in a warfare environment saying, we are going to take over this land in the name of our demigod. That's exactly what you would get as the Bible. I mean,
Hmm.
this is Bronze Age mythology that just
Yeah.
became kind of institutionalized, for lack of a better
Hmm.
word. It became institutionalized. It became somewhat respectable, in terms of culturally, everyone started to respect the power of the church, and the bishops and priests and so forth. But just because something's institutionalized and has an appearance of respectability because there's authority figures, and it's like, that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the claims of it are accurate or truthful. It just
Exactly. It
means
has
that
nothing to do with the
everyone's
truth.
saying it's bowing their knee to it now. It's
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
What,
It's terrible.
what were
Yeah.
some of the other things that I know we touched on a few things that, like, we've investigated, but are there any other things that you've kind of looked into that kind of shook your world, where you realized, oh, this is part of the story, or the background of it all?
I think we cover most of that stuff in terms of, like I said, the theology of it, in terms of, like, you know, how I felt, Jesus lied to me about saying he was going to come back and he didn't. And then about for me, the big one too was, like I said, the inconsistency of God's character in the Bible. One minute he's over here killing everybody. The next minute he's nice. The fact that I didn't realize that Satan, I don't even think Satan even killed anybody like that in the Bible. It's debatable if you want to talk about Job's family or not, but God killed a lot of people, and I don't even think Satan lied. I'm like, wait a minute, Satan seems like he's the good guy in this all. But some other factors that were not part of the Bible that really bothered me was, like I said, when I was learning about the Eastern religions, um, a lot of them seem to make a lot more sense to me than the Bible. I didn't. The problem though that the two is that I could tell that they were still human creations, but that they still made a lot more sense and they had a lot less issues than the Bible did. And that was problematic to me because I was like, man, I wish this stuff was true because I could at least follow this because this one makes more sense than what I'm supposed to be believing. Especially like Jainism, I'm a pacifist, right? I don't like all this killing and murdering, and Jainism, they're very extreme when it comes to pacifism. And I see all this religion like, man, that sucks that they don't have this issue. I have over here reading the Bible talking about let's kill the Amalekites, and you guys don't even want to kill a bug. Like this is just this is terrible. It was really hard that whole thing, and then seeing how like a big part of it was just seeing how devoted people of other faiths were. Like they knew why they did not believe the Bible. They knew it. They like hearing the reason why the New Testament was um, problematic from an actual Jew who knows how to read Hebrew, who knows about the prophecies that Christians considered prophecies that were not really prophecies. Christians just kind of like infusing their own stuff into stuff that wasn't even about that. Especially the whole Isaiah 53 and other passages as well. Daniel's a big one. When I'm hearing it from them and they're so devout and they believe it, hearing even from Muslims about how our New Testament or our quote unquote New Testament is a lot of problems in it. It's very troubling because it's not like they're just coming at it so mean. It's like I could see that they actually believed as much as I believed in my God. They believed in theirs. They were very devout. They were emotional. They were, so it's different hearing it from a Christian perspective about what other people believe versus hearing it from their own mouths, and then hearing from them why they don't believe yours. It was just so much to take on, and yeah, it's a lot. And that's why when I came to the end of it, I really was like, there's no way anyone's gonna believe me. And I'm not even gonna try to convince anybody of this because they're not gonna believe me anyways. So when during quarantine, I kind of like I kind of got back into researching a lot of this stuff, because there's nothing to do during quarantine. I found Cosmic Skeptic and stuff like that, and that kind of branched off to finding a bunch of other people. And I learned a lot more stuff. The whole Enoch stuff I actually even learned in college. I actually learned that from you. One of your videos you talked about it, and I was like, let me research into the Enoch stuff. And then I was reading, I was like, oh my goodness, that's true. Um, so yeah, I learned, and that's the thing too. I feel like I learned so much from non-believers than I believe from Christians. Like I feel like Christians, it's like a hamster in a wheel. They keep repeating the same stuff over and over again, and it's like nothing new, nothing different. They can't get deep into it because once you get deep into it, it's like everything falls apart. They have to stay surface level. But with you guys, it's like you guys go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's like after you peel off the first layer, you see that there's so many problems with it. It's like you can't escape it. So
Yeah.
I feel like I've been learning a lot.
It's amazing to me that they really don't care what you're learning. Like I've got loved ones who um, they'll watch The Walking Dead or Harry Potter over and over, even repeatedly. Um, they'll do not talking like, oh, they're watching apologists. They'll go watch anything that's just pure entertainment. They'd rather be entertained, even on non-Christian stuff, than take one little step to say, what are you learning? What are you reading these days? I haven't had a single person in my family, my loved ones, who ever said anything like, can you just give me your top 5 videos or a top, 3 books to read? I can already tell you up front, I think I'm going to disagree, but I just want to know what you're learning. I'm curious. Give me your top few things and I'll read them. And in, a couple weeks, we'll come back and kind of touch base on them. I'll see what I think. They don't care. They don't care to learn. They don't care to listen. Um, Part of it is they want to be the teachers. They want to be like, we're the ones that instruct sinful humanity. We're the ones with truth. We teach you. We're not going to come to, ask you to teach us something, which is the um, arrogance is truly off the charts. But I think too that this idea that it threatens so much, like it's almost like, as a kid, you put your fingers in your ears, la 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 la. La. They'd rather do that in a sense than admit the possibility in their own minds, not even in discussions with us, but just in their own minds. If you admit even a possibility that this might just be mythology and nothing more, this might just be make believe, this might be as real as Santa Claus, to admit that even as a fraction of a remote possibility, um, there's an inherent terror to it that says, especially when you're talking about heaven, like maybe I don't go anywhere. Maybe I'm just gonna die someday, and that's it. My time, when my time's up, my time's up, and I don't go anywhere. I don't see anybody. I don't get to do anything. And I think so many of us were so entrenched in this idea of the glories of heaven, the wonders of eternity, that it goes on and on and on. It gets better and better and better and better. And the wonders of it are just beyond your wildest imagination. You cannot imagine what God has prepared for those who love him. And to think, I go nowhere. I'm truly, especially when you bring in evolution, like I'm just a product of a long string of animals, and I am an animal, a very heavily evolved animal, and I'm very glad I'm conscious, but I'm an evolved animal, and that's it. The idea that that might possibly be accurate for Christians is terrorizing. And I suspect that that's what's behind it, because if they say, Cameron, tell me what you're learning, tell me what you saw, what you must have some good reasons for leaving. They're admitting, even as just as a, what's the phrase? Even if it's just for this going through the motions, they're admitting that maybe I've got a make believe religion. And if you go there in your mind, it will shake you up as a Christian. I think, and that's what shook me up when I went through it. I was sitting right here at this computer a little over 2 years ago, and I remember thinking to myself, it all happened like in an hour. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't think this is real. I truly, like you said when you're praying, like you just, this isn't real, is it? And like talking to myself, isn't it real, is it? And I thought to myself, my literal first thought, like when I truly said that, not out loud, truly, but in my head,
Yeah.
like, this isn't real. My first thought was, is that even possible that humanity could have been duped for 2,000 years? It's like, no. And I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, we would say it about every other religion. All these other religions have been duped for hundreds
Mm-hmm.
and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we suddenly say Christianity couldn't have duped humanity for 2,000 years? And once I realized, like, yeah, we could have duped ourselves for 2,000 years easily as a species. Once I realized that, and I've added all the stuff we're talking about with, the origins, that it's coming from copies of Homer, from Enoch, from all these other Greco-Roman mystery cults, the dying and rising gods motifs, you're like, oh snap. And it just hits you. And I was like, I've described it as being buckled into a seat right in front of a fire hydrant, and someone does the cap, and I mean, it just floods. I mean, and then within an hour, I was fully out. I mean, fully. You could not get me back under any circumstances. Again, nothing to do with sin. It was just like, this stuff isn't real. And once you
Yeah.
see it all, you can't unsee it. I mean, I know some people
Yeah.
claim to go back, but I'll be doing a response video to some of that shortly. But like once you truly see it and you realize this is truly from Homer, this is truly from Enoch, this is truly from, Dionysius and stuff, you can't really unsee it unless you do mental games with yourself. You cannot unsee that this is truly mythology.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it's true. I actually do have one family member who um said that they do want to know why I don't believe. They're under the impression that we have the same information and that I'm just interpreting it a different way. And
Mm,
I don't want to sound like condescending or anything like that. I just don't believe that we have the same information because I studied this for years and I continue to study it even after. And, no offense to her, but I know she just reads the apologist books. So I highly doubt. And I actually compiled a bunch of videos and stuff, for her to read. I haven't given it to her. It's been over a year since we talked about it because I feel like even though she says she wants to know, I just don't really believe it. And I feel like, and I don't want to, it's interesting. It's interesting because I don't want to be the reason for anyone's deconversion per se. I always feel like someone has to want to know the truth on their own. And if you feel like you already have the truth and you really, then there's no point. And I just feel like, and I don't know if, and part of me, I feel bad. Like, I feel bad, like if you're in a marriage, you have kids, like, I don't know how, I actually don't even really know your story. I probably have to go look in the archives to see which video you posted it on, but I don't know what happened. I just see a lot of bad things that happen to people that are in marriages where one person deconverts and they either get a divorce or they're, like, well, I mean, not everyone, Pine Creek, he's still married and stuff like that, but I just know a lot of times it doesn't work out like that, where the other partner is like, we're unequally yoked, so I got to balance it. I just see, so I don't, for me, I let you guys do what you guys do, and I just sit back and hope for the best. But in terms of my family, I don't feel like they honestly want to know. Like, and that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't think that they do. I think that they believe they have the truth, and that's it. Like, and I'd be afraid to share with them. So I have a whole document and everything with a bunch of stuff, but I don't feel like they would. I don't know how they would react if they were actually to go through it all. I think it'd be too overwhelming because it's a lot. So
Yeah. Well, I'm more of the militant side of it, and I'm working on I've got a document too. I'm working on it. It's huge, but I'm very hopeful about it. If you want to hear about it, there's a video I've got about the big project has begun. I think I titled it something like that. But I I think it's really cool to get to a point where, like, you know a lot now. You're kind of dangerous, and it kind of reminds me of these movies you see where there's like someone from the on the inside, who knows how some group works, and then they turn and like, I'm going to take them down from the inside. I'm going to do an inside job. It's like, I know enough of how the church works. I went to Bob Jones University in Lancaster Bible College to be a minister. I went to New Tribes to be a missionary. I know how this thing works. I've been involved in churches for decades and missions groups for decades. I know how this thing works, and I know what they're doing. I know what they're not doing. I know what they are doing, and I know how to take them down, and I want to. I want people to realize that they are literally giving their lives over to a delusion, and they're wasting their life, and they're hurting kids really badly. But it's awesome that your family member there is at least willing to talk about it. I hope you all do get a chance to follow up when the time's right and see where
me
it takes
too.
you.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious. I've touched on the idea of the impact and the terror of realizing that this might not be real. How did you deal with it? Like, just take for example the idea of what if there's no heaven? Did that really jar you? Were you like, oh my goodness, like, how do I deal with this? Like, what was your actual emotional side of the deconversion like?
It was hard. It was one of the last things that kept me holding on as dearly as I could because I wanted to see my sister again in heaven and my friends and stuff like that. So, and it was scary. It was kind of like I didn't know what was going to happen if I stopped believing. So, um, not believing in heaven was hard because obviously you grew up your entire life. That's kind of like your main goal, right? Is to get to heaven. So, um, yeah, it was very nerve wracking, traumatizing, just scary.
Mm.
Because everything that you're living for, everything that you're putting yourself into, you're finding like it's not true. It's like, what are you supposed to do at that point? It's like not only just does God does not exist, but heaven's not real either. Like nothing. So what am I supposed to do? And I didn't know. I felt like I was free falling. It was really scary at that point.
Mm. That's a good way to put it. What what kind of journey or what steps did you take to kind of get regrounded and start over and get healthy?
I didn't. I just, like I said, I dealt with it all by myself. I just did a lot of thought, and I guess I just was so consumed with after I the faith left me, and I kind of just let it go. After the moment of there's like a period of time where it was like scary, but that was as I was going through it. As I was came out the other end, it wasn't scary anymore. I just kind of felt free and at peace. It's really weird. It was like as the faith is leaving you, it's like you're like wanting to scream and hold on for your life, but then once you let it go, it's like you're flying. It's like I felt like somebody took off my Christian binoculars, and then like now I could see better. I'm like, what? And everything just opened up, and everything just came more real, and I felt better. I didn't have to do any type of like mental care. The only bad thing though was is that since I had no direction, I there was a period of time where I I don't want to say I was rebellious, but since I didn't have any direct, after I was done with my research and I kind of started living life after that, then I kind of just kind of, I don't say rebelled, but I kind of just started doing stupid stuff. Not too bad, but just whatever. Because I didn't know what I was doing. And then going through that by myself and not really having anybody to go through, I kind of had like a depression outbreak thing because, you know, when you're the only heathen in your family, and then you kind of have to, your family isn't taking it on too well. It kind of is a hard situation when you're really close to them. So, but
Did
generally,
any of them shun you?
So they, I don't want to say they shunned me. Like my family, they love me a lot. It was just very hard for them to deal with, but none of them shunned me. There was a moment of time where we were kind of like separated because it was the hard situation. But it's been it's been a lot of years. But more recently, now we're all pretty much come together. Like if you go to my YouTube channel, down back in like December, we had this whole 12 days of Christmas challenge, and it wasn't even my idea. It was my cousin's idea. Everyone, they put it together, they participated. It was like my family, they love me, and that's what makes this whole situation very difficult, is because I love them, they love me, and they're sad for me because, you know, I'm a heathen or whatever, and I'm sad for them because it's like I don't want them to believe this nonsense, but I'm not. What am I supposed to do? You know, I'm not going to sit there and try to convince them that, you know, their beliefs are dumb. So I don't know. It's hard. You know, it's hard.
It is. It is very hard. You mentioned before families like mine where there is a believer and an unbeliever, and you basically, I'm sure I'm speaking for many people in saying this, but you basically walk on eggshells because there is an inherent discrepancy there, and it's interesting. I've seen some posts even recently from some Christian groups where they talk about if your spouse is not a believer, the very best thing you can do is just love them back to Jesus. You know, just be them the best, the kindest, most generous. And I've seen, you know, from my personal experience and from others who've given me many, many similar responses and feedback, the answer that most Christians give at that point is, you're a traitor. I mean, whether we're talking about spouses or just families, you're a traitor. You knew this was the truth. You knew Jesus is Lord. And you're not just kind of quietly saying, you know, I've got some questions and I'm looking at some stuff. You're saying, I'm actually out. This is wrong. This is mythology. It's hurting kids. And when you make that leap to the point where they see you as a traitor, this whole dynamic that you'd expect maybe or hope, or, you know, best case scenario, you'd hope that there'd be some kind of love or respect for, like people saying, Kamron, I know you knew what was at stake, not just in terms of our response as your family or your friends, but you knew it was at stake between you and the creator God, and you still left. You must know something. You must have some reason. And for them to look at that and say, I don't care what your reason is, and then to add on to it, instead of loving you back to Christ, I'm going to snark you into a point where you feel like you're just garbage every minute of the day. That's basically what a lot of people are facing, and it's horrific. And it basically, I'm sure there's some marriages where it works out, but for a lot of people, like you said, that ends in divorce, or if it doesn't end in divorce, you're basically living like divorced people but staying married, because you just feel like there's no compatibility there. They want to worship someone who doesn't exist, and this demigod, this Canaanite demigod, is more important. Loving him, loving Yahweh, is more important than loving you. Like, you're right there in front of them, and they're going to love this Canaanite demigod from 3,000, 4,000 years ago. They're going to worship that, who's never been real and has never ever shown himself to them, but yet you're flesh and blood and you're right in front of him. They're going to love him more than you. And from an atheist perspective, that's bullshit. That's garbage. And from their perspective, you're the traitor. And so you have that, and I guess the phrase might be, you're sleeping with the enemy, without the sleeping with part. You know, you're in a house with the enemy, and it sucks for a lot of people. I've heard some stories where people find some really respectful grounds to say, you know, like, I really want to hear your story. I really respect where your journey's taking you, I still believe. And people, there are some, diamonds in the rough or whatever you'd say, that people do find some common ground. But for a lot of people, the people that reach out to me, and I get hundreds of emails a month, the people that reach out to me are just, they're being beat to a pulp by the Christians. And as we like to say, there's no hate like Christian love, and it's true. I mean, it's a cliche. We say it tongue in cheek, jokingly, but it's very true. Christian love is absolutely full of hate. If you leave the church, they will hate you, and you will pay for it. You'll pay for it dearly. Anyway, I'm off on a rabbit trail there. I did want to ask. You mentioned the whole piece. The blinders good taken off. Could you dive just a little bit more into here to wrap up? What has life been like for you on the other side, and just how do you? Some people say, "What's my purpose now?" You mentioned morality. People, but it's like you have to reset. You have to have new roots. You're pulling the roots up and you're trying to pull whatever you can find, and some of them, they're so deep you have to dig for years to get them out. But you're trying to dig out whatever you can of the bad ideas, and you're trying to restart. How do you restart your life as someone who's deconverted? And how did you, like, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in your emotional well-being?
That's a good question. It's constantly, I think one thing that I would say is that it's constantly changing. Like, like I was saying earlier, as a Christian, I feel like, and the Christians probably will disagree with me, obviously, but I feel like there's a peak. There's like a limit. But I feel like out of it, it's constantly changing. Like what I think about life, what I think about beliefs, what I think about everything, it's constantly changing, especially now more so than ever. When I had first, like I said, when I first, had lost my faith, I probably spent another year or so, like still reading a lot of books by John Loftus and all these other people, like, and becoming more firm that this was all, whatever. But I guess I didn't really think about the deeper thoughts until recently, like I said, until quarantine, when I don't even know how I randomly found Cosmic Skeptics video. And then from there, you know how YouTube algorithms go, they just spiral out of control. And then I'm watching, Vice Rhino, Pine Creek, all these other people. And then you guys are the ones that actually make me think more about the deeper thoughts about stuff like that. And I was kind of, honestly, before I was just living life. And my biggest concern was just, making sure I was, going to work, paying bills, whatever. But since then, I've been now thinking about deeper thoughts about morality and about, all this philosophical and stuff like that. I never thought about that stuff before too much, but you guys kind of like triggered my brain to like, so now I'm constantly thinking about those things like almost all the time. It's almost like an obsession to like want to watch one of your guys' videos because I feel like I'm always learning something new. And I feel like I'm just constantly evolving in my mindset in terms of like what I believe or what I don't believe or what, just stuff like that. So you could ask me that question today and it'll probably be different in a week. It's because it's constantly changing. But like I said, right now, the biggest thing that I feel like I'm free to learn. I'm free. And that's what it's like I don't have to live with cognitive dissonance anymore. I feel like now I'm able to learn, read, and just try to figure stuff out. I don't have to hold on to anything and try to make it make sense. I could just listen to you, listen to them, listen to anybody, and take everything with a grain of salt, ponder it, and assess it. And I don't have to like worry about trying to make sure that what I believe is true. You know what I'm saying? This is a different mindset, but I just feel overall more at peace, happier, and I don't really worry about afterlives. Like I'm pretty much agnostic about it. I don't believe that any of the proposed afterlives are true. Obviously, I don't believe in heaven or anything like that. I really don't care if I die. It's kind of like before I was born. What's the difference? It's nothing. And I actually feel like that makes life more valuable, because if life is eternal, then there's no like things that are valuable or things that are rare, right? Not things that are you could just right. That things are or eternal, that kind of makes it the opposite effect. So for me, it's like I try to base my life off of helping as many people as I can. That's why I'm into the fitness coaching and stuff, because it's like I want people to, when they're here, since I care about their lives now, I want to make sure that they're, prioritizing their health so they can, when they're here, they're not be in pain, not be sick, not have to take medication. They could actually, live a healthier and happier life in general, and not, sick and always in the hospital. So that's pretty much where my mindset is at, is just trying to literally help people here and now, versus before as a Christian trying to help people for a future that clearly isn't even existing. So
Yeah, well said. Could I just ask one final question as we wrap up? We've obviously gone a few stages past the deconversion process. We've had time to get past the grief, past the bizarre, like what just happened phase, and what was this? We've kind of gone through even some of that whole Stockholm syndrome. Like, who was my captor? What was this thing that had me for so long? We've dove through several of those layers, but we both remember when you're first starting, it's a roller coaster, and just being willing to ask certain questions, like, just what if this isn't real, and then just deciding, like, yeah, actually this doesn't sound like it's real at all. Getting through those stages and actually deconverting, um, unplugging, as it were, from the matrix. When you go through that and you're past it, you can look back and say, I feel bad for the people that still have to go through it. Um, and I honestly do kind of both daydream about, but also feel bad for the people that are in my life that I love that might have to go through it someday. And I feel bad that some of them are going to be okay, but some of them is going to really shake them up if they ever get out at all. Some of them I'm sure will never get out. But could you maybe wrap us up with any advice you'd give to somebody who's kind of just crossed that line and said, you know what, I'm pretty much tracking with what you're saying, and I'm not necessarily out yet, or maybe I'm pretty much I am out, but I'm not willing to admit it yet. They're just right on that fringe of getting out, and they know that life's about to get weird, and that some people are about to get really nasty to them. What would you say to somebody who's just getting started in that phase of this experience?
since I had to do this all by myself and it was really hard, my only suggestion is to try to find a community. I feel like YouTube has a great community of people, honestly. So that's probably my biggest thing, is because when you have to deal with it by yourself, it is hard. I'm not gonna lie. Especially if you're the only one in your family or in your community that are questioning, that are figuring out that maybe this isn't true, and you might feel you're alone. Um, to find, I don't want to like necessarily like um uh you know advocate for, well, no, I think it's a good thing. I don't know about recovering from religion, but I'm just saying you don't have to go to recovering from religion. You could, I guess, but just in general, like, go. There's probably Facebook groups, I'm sure. There's probably groups everywhere, but just try to find a community of people that you could talk to and ask, even if it's privately. If you don't want to, be out there on YouTube, like, find a group of people that, or at least one person that you can confide in and talk to, because, like I said, dealing with it on your own by yourself is difficult and challenging, and I feel like it's probably a lot smoother process when you could actually talk to somebody who's either going through with it with you or have already gone through it, so you could have some sort of support system as it's happening, because it could be challenging alone. So that was probably my biggest advice. That's my thing.
Yeah, well said. And that's a great point to end on. That you're going to lose your community most likely, unless you kind of keep it quiet and do it stealthily, which some people do, which is fine. There's reasons to do that, especially in certain countries. But yeah, just the idea of you lose your community, that's such a painful part of this. And to realize that as much as it sounds scary, your tribe, so to speak, gets redefined. And all of a sudden, the people that you go to right now for your support, for your love, for your help, it's probably going to get to a point where there's just no way to keep the same community. There's just no way, unless you truly just play a game, because you won't respect what they're doing, and they certainly won't respect what you're doing. And it's hard because I mean, breaking up friendships, even marriages, having distance from parents. It's such a painful experience. So if anyone is going through that and is looking for Facebook groups, if you can find them, great. If you can't, reach out to me directly. Give me some time. I've got a lot of emails that come in every day, but I'll try to get back to you because I can get you hooked up with some Facebook groups too. That's such a big part of this is getting people to say, you're not crazy, you're seeing this right. It's the Christians who are doing some really horrible things. And I don't just mean the dominion theology, we're going to take over the country for Christ people, even just average Christians who just love Jesus and love the blood and love the cross. They're going to look stranger and stranger and weirder and more scary in terms of what they're doing. And as you kind of reset your own life, to have people around you to say, no, you're seeing it right. This is some weird stuff. And I mean, eat my flesh and drink his blood, eat my flesh and drink my blood. I need you to cut off the end of little boys' penises to make me happy. It's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder. And eventually, you need people around you to say, no, you're not crazy. They're crazy. You are seeing it right. And so great point. Very well taken. Well, is there any, I know we asked a lot of questions here. It's getting late, but is there any other thoughts you want to wrap us up with before we call it a day?
Not really. I mean, I don't know. I think hopefully I've answered all your questions. Sometimes I over-explain to get sidetracked, but I think I said everything else. Other than that, you guys can check me out on my YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And if anyone who's watching, cares to get their health in check or in line, you could feel free to hit me up, and I'm here to help. So that's pretty much what I got to say.
Absolutely. I'll probably hit you myself for that. I need to stop drinking the Starbucks lattes, I think. Anyway, well, thank you so much, Kamron. We've been speaking with Kamron Bennett. It's been awesome to get to know you, to hear your story. Please keep at this. We need your voice in the community. We need your story and your insights. It sounds like you're on a journey, so there's probably a lot more coming that you're going to be sharing with the community over the next few years. We look forward to all you've got to share. But thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kamron.